Gnosis. Welcome to our communal child sacrifice. Welcome to the shipwreck we call Aeon Arcanum. Where the smoke dissipates, you will find us. Light a cigarette, and we are there. Join us as we anathematize and criticize all those who oppose us. We're broadcasting live from the hot pleroma of love, beaming vitamin gnosis into the empty veins of Konoma dwellers. So sit down, grab an apple, and join us because after all, an apple a day keeps the angry gods away. Today is May the 7th in the year of our demiurge 2013. We're bringing you double penetration gnosis because two dickheads are better than one. We are proudly tag teaming Orthodox virgins, one convent at a time. This is the AA for your soul, the Prep H for your hylic hemorrhoids, the Excedrin for your psychic migraine. We are not endorsed or funded by archons, powers, authorities, principalities, or Fannie Mae, nor do we accept sacrifice. We enjoy long walks on the beach, and in our free time, we bribe pimps to buy Helena clones to add to our collection. Our guest today is Glen Cram, author of the upcoming autobiography of Satan himself, the infamous Simon Magus. He's here to smack the generic brand Jesus blood out of your mouth, because you've got a fever, and the only cure is more gnosis. Your ass can belong to Jehovah, but your soul belongs at Aeon Arcanum. Get lost with us in the Bermuda Triangle of dangerous ideas, where heretics aren't burned by fire but consumed by gnosis. I'm your host, James, and so it begins again. How you doing today, Glenn?
I'm pretty good. How about you?
Doing good, except for the fact that we just basically went 3 questions into the interview and had it mess up, so we're trying to redo it. But
Yes.
I'm great besides that. So I guess we'll just start off by just introduce yourself and say a little about yourself, what your background is, and maybe what inspired you to write your book.
Okay, well, my name's Glen Cram. I was born in England. I live now in Toronto, Canada. And I've always been interested in sort of the religion. I guess as I said, I remember being 5 years old and my father's brother, the Baptist minister, was telling me about God and Jesus and salvation and all that, and I thought to myself, that's just not true. But and yet, I'll tell you. Are you familiar with the God gene? With that theory?
Yeah, a little bit.
So basically, what this person said was that some people have a natural sense of believing in God, and some people just don't.
Right, kind of like the divine spark in Gnosticism.
Exactly, yeah. So some people have it, like they have that feeling that the world is conscious and it knows about them and
yeah, I had
and
that.
cares about them. And some people just don't. Like they may believe in God, but they only believe in God like you believe in China because somebody in authority tells them it's true.
Right,
So you
right.
have to act this way because God will get you, but you don't have this connection with God. So. And he looked at the DNA of these people, and he found that, DNA, it's this long thing with millions of little pairs, and there's A's and T's and G's and C's. And he found out that in the people who believe in God, they have an A in this place on their DNA.
Okay.
And the people who don't have a G in that place on their DNA. And therefore, so it's in the genes. It's not in everybody, but it's he found a significant correlation. Anyway, so I intellectually, I don't believe in God. I think it's nonsense. But philosophically and existentially, I guess I do, because I've always been interested in religion, in sort of strange beliefs and esoteric type stuff. And I was reading this book by John Allegro, who wrote about the sacred mushrooms being the origin of all religions. But he was also an expert on the Dead Sea Scrolls, and he wrote about the teacher of righteousness of the Essenes, and he said that Jesus was probably based on him and other messianic figures, including Simon, whose life has quite a few parallels with Jesus himself, although the religions that they founded went quite different directions.
Right. So how were you first introduced to the apocryphal writings, the secret writings outside the New Testament?
Well, I had read little bits and pieces over the years. When I started doing writing, I found this book by Willis Barnstone that I believe you know.
Yeah, I have it on my shelf, the other Bible.
And it has collections of sort of excerpts from all the apocryphal Gospels, from Kabbalistic writings, from Gnostic writings, from mystery writings from that time. And so it was an excellent sort of primary source for all the different materials. It had a lot of the different, the life of Simon, for example, the different legends associated with him.
Yeah, he has he actually has a chapter in there on Simon Magus and a few other
a whole chapter with
like facilities. Right.
From Hippolytus and Irenaeus and those guys, and then the fan fiction. And yeah, so that was my main research, and then I went and read the originals after, obviously.
So what got you interested in anthropology? What made you pursue that?
I don't know. It was, again, just things outside my own experience, I guess. Like the idea that people living in different places or different times, although they're like ourselves, obviously. They have the same basic human urges, but also their mentalities can be totally alien. And that's one of the things that I try to show in the book also. Like that time, they're like us. The people are like us in all the things that really matter, obviously. Their relationships.
They just have different existential circumstances and different societal norms and stuff like that too, right?
Exactly, yeah. So in some ways, like, they're totally alien. Like for example, the world is just full of spirits. It's like the world is alive. Like, the Earth is your mother. The moon is a woman looking down at you, and it's just a different way of looking at the world. And I'm trying to capture that in the book. So
what's your favorite ancient culture? Is it Egypt, Sumer, Canaan, the Hittites? Like, what do you find the most interesting? Or is it a lesser known one?
Well, they all have their things. I've always liked the Etruscans. They're
okay. They're pre-Romans.
Yeah, the pre-Roman sort of hedonistic characters, just living. No one knows. Didn't they have
like a goddess of the hearth and stuff like that, which was like the goddess of the household?
Yeah. Well, the Romans had that too. They had their little gods all over the house and everything like that.
Right. Was that like a It seems kind of like it was a staple of early Canaanite society too, like a lot of ancient cultures.
They did, yeah. Well, it goes back to Venus of Willendorf, right? The little household god that you bury in under your altar. So.
Right. And then they had the bullhorns on the wall, like in Jericho and like that. So, could you tell everyone what your website is?
It's simonmagus.com. Very fortunate that I got that name.
How did you end up getting that?
Well, when I first started writing the book, they didn't even have websites. But after I'd been doing it for a while, and they started coming out with these things, I thought I better get it, but someone else had it. And I waited, I think, probably about 5 years for that guy. And I just kept watching him, and it'd come up to the time when it was expired, and then he'd renew it. But finally, 1 year he didn't renew it, and I grabbed it. It was meant to be.
Yeah, you got lucky. You got the simonmagus.com, the one and only.
Yeah.
So you begin on your website by making 6 statements about a man, and you ask the reader who's that Messiah. And the bullet points you list are the following. You say he lived in Palestine in the 1st century. He was said to be a manifestation of God. He inspired people by his teaching and amazed them with his miracles. He hung out with low-life outcasts and a prostitute. He started a new religion and died a shameful death before Roman authorities. You then shock your reader with the answer that it's Simon Magus. Now, I know you don't see Simon as Jesus, but what other parallels, maybe in teaching or in their life story, do you see between them?
Well, Jesus is a character in the book. Like, people say, well, he didn't exist. Well, who knows if Simon existed, right? Simon is a composite of at least 3 different people from that time, I'm sure. So, but the other, apart from those things, I would say they're very different. Like, one thing, Simon starts his religion sort of by accident. He takes over the cult of Dositheus. Dositheus was a disciple of John the Baptist. he took over his cult, and then Simon takes it over from him, sort of by force. And then he starts his own magical practice. And he has different motivations for doing it, but he's not. But Jesus is a prophet, right? He's serious. He believes in this stuff. He has experiences in his early life which are. He sort of tries to make his way in society, but he just can't. He's a total dope. Like, for example, once when I don't know if you read this one, where a guy gave him a job as a shepherd. And so, and then he sends his steward out to check and see how he's doing as a shepherd. And he comes along and he finds the whole flock of sheep is abandoned.
Was this from the Talmud? Or the
this is the parable of Jesus. Jesus told this story originally in the Bible.
Okay.
And then, so he's looking around, and all these sheep are just running around, and there's lions about, and he has to go gather all the sheep. And Jesus has just left these sheep, and then here comes Jesus, the little lamb on his shoulder. He's smiling.
Okay, this is the Good Shepherd parable?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
So I'm saying that Jesus' parables were true stories, and that they were episodes that happened to him. So I'm working on
so he was basically describing his life through parables.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. I've heard things like that before with the parables, like there's one that's describing Herod. And even Justin kind of sees the dialogue, the tempting of Satan. Justin Martyr kind of sees that as something about Herod as well. So other people see stuff.
You mean
like
when Jesus is in the desert being tempted?
Right.
Oh, that's Simon too. Don't worry.
Oh, okay. So, do you think that Simon was possibly an inspiration for the Orthodox version of Satan?
He was. If you look at, the original story of Simon from Acts is where he tries to buy the power of the Holy Spirit from the apostles, right? And Peter says, "Get out of here. You can't buy the Holy Spirit."
Yeah, you can't buy the gift of God.
Exactly, yeah.
Which is interesting because Dosithius means gift of God.
That is true. Yeah.
A couple scholars have noticed that.
And what does Barabbas mean?
Son of the Father, or Son of God.
Yeah. So, what was I saying? So in Acts, yeah. So in Acts is where he first appears. Oops. Is when he first appears, and he's trying to, and that's all we say. He's a magician. He calls himself the power of God. So he's pretending to be a Messiah. He tries to buy the power, and they cast him out basically. And is he converted? It's sort of ambiguous at the end of that story whether he is or not. And then he shows up, probably in the more like the 2nd century, as the writer of the Great Announcement, written up by apologists and those guys. Sort of the father of Gnosticism, setting forth the basic Gnostic myth. So it's for sure it's not the same character, right? I mean historically, but
yeah.
For my book and for the early Christian legends, of course, since they were both called Simon, they naturally said he was the same person. And he was the father of heresy and the Antichrist, and then they went on with the story of the Acts of Peter and Paul, where he goes to Rome and he's flying about with Nero. Did you ever see that movie, by the way?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, that was very good. I have an extra.
He climbs up that tower and then he says he's gonna fly and then he splats on the ground.
That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. So, also.
But you were asking whether he is inspiration for Satan.
Right.
In like when in the Clementine homilies.
Like the fall from heaven.
The which?
The fall from heaven of Lucifer when he becomes Satan.
Well, there is that. Yes.
I mean, he fell from the sky when he tried to fly, right?
Well, that's true. I didn't think of that one, but yeah, that's quite possible. Yeah. But yeah, in the Clementine homilies comes the story of Faustus, where Faustus is, as you know, the guy who he's the father of Clement, who is taken in by Simon, and then Simon takes his face, and so I've worked that into the story too. But I've made it more explicit, actually, where Faustus is the original of the, because Helena, his holy wisdom, Sophia, was reputed also to have been a reincarnation of Helen of Troy, and Faustus also wants the Helen of Troy in the Goethe tales, for example. So I've combined all that into one sort of.
I think also in Hippolytus he mentions something found in the Phaedrus by Plato about a poet who was struck blind by.
Tiresias.
Yeah, he was struck blind, and he basically ended up writing this little, poem about Helena, or Helen of Troy.
Yeah.
And he gets his sight back. I was actually just reading that last night. I didn't even realize it was from the Phaedrus somehow. Let's see what else. Could you tell us about, because earlier before we got cut off, you were talking about the Good Samaritan parable. How does that tie into your book?
Well, Simon is a Samaritan. How much of it he's, by which we mean, and by which he is, he's actually, in my story, he's a pagan. He's not really a Samaritan. But he lives in Samaria, and he's sort of surrounded by those people. And so you could say that he's a Samaritan by geography.
Kind of like by nationality or geography.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. So when he first meets Jesus, of course, since I said the parables are true, then he's a Samaritan. Jesus is beaten up in the ditch. He saves him. So that's their first encounter. And he's sort of flattered afterwards when Jesus starts telling that story.
Let's see. That's an interesting take. I never would have thought of that. Probably in a million years. So, I noticed too in the Gospel of Luke and John, Samaritans play a pretty prominent role, whereas in Matthew and Mark I don't even know if they're even mentioned in there. Besides, I mean, if they are, they're probably just spoken down of, right? Yeah. Why do you think it is that in Luke and John, Samaritans are viewed a little bit higher?
I don't know if they're viewed higher. I think it's more that...
Or they're mentioned more anyway.
Well, they're mentioned more, yeah. Because I think in those, like Luke and Matthew and Mark are sort of, they're more of the original. Like it's more sort of parochial, sort of within. But with Luke, of course, he traveled with Paul everywhere, and John was sort of the mystical guy who was not really Jewish. He was sort of going outside of Judaism. So I think when they talk about the Samaritans, like when Jesus talked to the Samaritan woman, it was sort of the first person he'd spoken to who wasn't like real Jewish,
right?
Real Judean Jewish. And so I think it's sort of a beginning of branching out, sort of the precursor of branching out and conquering the world.
Do you see any kind of parallel between the Samaritan woman? I think she had 5 husbands, right? Do you see any kind of parallel between that and the demons that are cast out of who's supposedly Mary Magdalene? She gets called that later. I don't think in the text she's called that. But do you see a parallel there, and maybe a parallel with Sophia and Helena?
Well, there's certainly that parallel. The Magdalene was sort of, the legend later on was that she was the adulterous woman. She was the prostitute.
With 5 demons, or...
Yeah, I don't think there was any. I don't think in the actual stories there was. I think that was
she's not
invented
named,
afterwards, right?
Right. I think she's just called a prostitute there, or an adulterer, or something.
Yeah, but in the gospel, she's never even called that. Like she's just sort of one of Jesus's followers.
Right.
And I think they gave. I think the church wanted to sort of give her that image to show that she had sunk so low and then she had risen so high, and there's definitely the same things with Sophia, although Sophia...
Like that lost sheep that's saved, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Right. Well, and then Simon calls her the lost sheep.
He does, yeah.
That's interesting, too.
Because she's a goddess. She starts off as... Is she the goddess Ishtar? Well, she says she is anyway. She seems to believe it. And she ends up something totally different at the end. If you read the last reading there called Return of the Goddess, did you read that one?
I didn't get to go through that one.
Well, that's where Simon comes to a temple of Jesus 400 years later. and finds her painted up on the wall with her baby in her arms, and and she's found a new place.
Oh, so in your story, that baby, that's not Mary, the mother of Jesus, it's Mary Magdalene, and the baby is Jesus' baby, or Simon's baby, or how does that work?
No, the baby is Jesus, because that's the story.
Okay.
Yaldabaoth has taken over everything, has taken over from all the gods, and they're all sort of hiding in him, because again, he has parts of all the gods in him.
Right.
And she's become the new mother goddess to the world.
Oh, okay. I like how you kind of you actually took these old stories, ran with it, created your own myth, and made an interesting story with it. And when do you plan on having it finished?
As I say, I'm going to be putting up this campaign. I hope to get a little money to be able to take some leisure time to do it. I would say, hopefully in the next year, I would have the first volume ready to publish. So right now, I'm sort of getting the word out to all different things. I'm joining all these very strange Facebook groups, of which yours is one of them, and of people of all peculiar beliefs. And
yeah. But you're going to find that with any kind of Gnostic persuasion, there's going to be a lot of different groups with a lot of different ties. Some will be Hermetic, some will be Luciferian. You never know.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I stayed away from the teenage Satanists, but other than that,
I don't think they find myth that interesting anyway.
No, maybe not.
Could you tell us a little about Indiegogo and Kickstarter? You were telling me about that. I found it interesting, and maybe if anyone's watching that aspires to write a book, you could send them the right way with this. I thought it was pretty cool. I might do it myself.
Yeah, well, Indiegogo, it's INDIEGOGO, or Kickstarter.com. They're what they call crowdfunding sites. And what you do basically is you have an idea for something and you want to raise money to accomplish it. People have raised literally millions of dollars through this. Not necessarily for this type of project. The most that I've seen for someone writing a novel, and this was someone who was, I think, semi-established before anyway, but he did raise $32,000.
That's pretty good.
But just by, and you put up a page and you put up videos and anything you can think of to make people want to give you money, and then you have to put in perks, which means that special little prizes that you give people at different levels. A very common one, which I'm going to have, and maybe someone here would like to contribute to it, is that if you give me some undetermined figure just yet, I'll make you a character in the book.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'll be a character in your book.
Yeah, there you go.
Let's see. So yeah, that's interesting. I'm gonna check that out and see what's on there. Also, let's see. You mentioned channeling Simon. What is your meaning? What do you mean by that?
I don't know. I guess like any person who's writing a book of this kind, which is an autobiography of someone, obviously it's going to be a lot of themselves in it. A lot of the characters are based composites or stolen directly from people that I've known, and so it's when I sort of sit down to write. I guess you probably have the same experience. Often you'll have no idea what you're going to write, and then at the end of an hour you look at it and what the hell was that? And that's,
where'd that come from?
Yeah. And so it seems like channeling Simon, but as I said, he's a very tricky guy. And he even admits at the beginning of the book that he doesn't remember everything that happened there. He sees it written, but he doesn't remember it. And some things that you wrote down, he acknowledges are lies, but he's just going to keep them because they're good lies. So you never know. I don't know if I can trust him, but I think he's telling a good story. So I'll let him. It's
all about the story when you're writing a book. So
that's it. Yeah.
Have you ever had any kind of I don't know, weird supernatural experiences in your life? They don't have to be extremely crazy or anything. I mean, I'm talking even like the basest, slowest things like I don't know, like a doppelganger, a familiar spirit, or.
I have had, yes. I've had some, although, as I say, I'm a totally atheist, but I'm a total believer too. I believe, though I know it's not true. I guess that's the definition of faith or something. But yes, I have had some experience. I can tell you one that was interesting. That had to do with my father. My father quite a long time ago. About 40 years ago, he was doing his exercise in the morning, and all of a sudden he clutched his heart and he said, "I think I'm having a heart attack. Better call the ambulance." So we called the ambulance, and they took him to the hospital, and he died.
Oh man!
And when he was telling me about it afterwards, he had the classic experience. He was on the table. He was in the hospital. They brought him in. They threw him down, and they got no vital signs. And he was looking. He felt himself floating away. He saw, the tunnel and the light and the people, all the old aunts and grandmothers saying, "Come on, come on," and it felt so peaceful. And he was just ready to float away. And then, bang! They put the electric shocks on his heart, and back he was in his own body again. And so after that, he sort of got a little. He got a little religious. He was always kind of, sort of into that, but he was a little more.
Did he resent the doctors for that?
He did. Yes, he was very mad because they put the shock on him. He was in agony when he came back.
Yeah.
And so anyway, he was a professor at McGill University, which is in Montreal, as far as living at that time, and I was also studying there.
Okay.
And so, and I was studying in the same department. But he used to work up north with the Eskimos in the north of Canada, the Inuits, as we say. And so I was supposed to do that.
Did he ever communicate with any of them?
I actually worked up there too for a couple of years.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he was supposed to be up. He was supposed to be there when I graduated on the stage. But he was up north with the Eskimos, so he wasn't there. All right. So a couple of years after that, he died for real. And he died actually up north in Baffin Island in the north of Canada. And so after he died, because of all his good work with the Inuits and the Indians, they decided to name an auditorium after him in the university. And so they called me. And so I was living in Toronto, so I came to Montreal for this ceremony. And before the ceremony, I was in my father's back room, just in the back room of my mother's house, and there was a lot of books there. They had a bunch of books on millions of different subjects on everything. And I pulled down a book on calculus, which is not a subject that I'd ever studied, really, and not a subject that he ever studied, but I just pulled it down.
Not a subject I'm very interested in myself, but I've done it a little bit.
Well, not at all. So I don't know why I picked this book, but anyway, I took it down and I opened it up, and there was a note from him. And the note had been written at the time, 6 years before my graduation. And he was saying, sorry I couldn't be at the graduation. Next time for sure. And next time I'll be at the stage winking at you. Okay?
Wow.
And then that afternoon, we went to the dedication of this auditorium, and here was his picture up on the wall, winking down.
Oh, wow. That's pretty far out there right there.
Yeah.
It's a nice story.
Oh, yeah.
Also, okay, so moving on, that's actually very interesting. I've heard some, but not one like that. In your book, you mention Looney as Simon's dead brother. What made you, or what inspired you to add this character? And is there any parallels between this character and stories of Philip K. Dick's dead sister?
Well, I know Philip K. Dick. I may have read about that dead sister. I'm not sure. I wasn't consciously based on that, I have to say.
Okay.
It was based more on an original story that was told about Simon, that he had a boy of air that he sort of created, he either murdered somebody and kidnapped their spirit, or he created them out of air. And so I sort of based that character on that, and and he's sort of there for Simon sometimes. He goes away and comes back, and he turns out to be more than he appears in the end.
Does he function somewhat like like Socrates is daemon? Or familiar?
That sort of idea, yeah. Mm-hmm. Although he's not as smart. Like, he was born as a Down syndrome, so he was.
Okay.
But he's still he knows a lot and he can do a lot.
Okay. Also, speaking of Philip K. Dick, you said that before we got into the interview that you were a big fan of Philip K. Dick and had read his, I believe you said all his books,
Quite a few of them, but
or
many
quite
years
a
ago.
few at least.
Yeah.
What do you think of Philip K. Dick? What's your take on his books? Do you see Gnostic themes in them?
I don't know. It's been a while since I read them.
Okay.
It's hard to say. I know that he's associated with that, but I can't really say no.
Do you have a favorite?
A favorite book of his?
Mm-hmm.
The Man in the High Castle. Do you know that one?
Okay. Yeah.
That was a sort of a parallel universe, and there was another. Yeah, this long ago.
Is that the one where I'm pretty sure that's the one where like the U.S. is like partitioned, right? And the Nazis have part of it or something.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an alternate history type of thing. Yeah.
Right. Interesting. We got a Philip K. Dick fan. um, in your book, why did you include? I think it was Gorgio the werewolf and Celine the witch, and what inspired those characters?
Gorgio is sort of based on a person that I knew who was also Greek, and he was sort of like a Dionysian type, like a sort of a Zorba, the movie Zorba.
No, I haven't seen
Zorba the Greek. And anyway, he was sort of that sort of character, like a primal nature person. It's based on a legend that's in Pausanias and I believe mentioned in Plato too, about how this place where every 7 years, in order to protect the people of the area in Arcadia, someone had to go and live with the wolves and control the wolves. And so he's one of these people. And he does have sort of wolfish characteristics which come out. He doesn't actually turn, he is pretty hairy, I guess, but he doesn't really turn into a wolf himself, although he can show that.
Is he kind of that proverbial man that doesn't fit into society like Aristotle would talk about?
It's that sort of person, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Like, in The Tempest, Caliban, that's that type of character.
Mm-hmm. Also, when we were talking, you mentioned Lucan on the Civil War inspiring you.
Yeah, the character of Selene, actually, her mother is the witch who was mentioned there, and Erictho, who was mentioned in the Pharsalia. But I just stole the part where she brings the dead body back to life, and so that they can conduct their thing and eventually meet Azathoth,
okay.
who becomes Yaldabaoth in Simon's mythology. So, did you read that one?
I didn't read the Azathoth part. Could you tell us about that?
Orchestra of the Damned. If you're familiar with Lovecraft, you'll recognize it.
I'm not a huge Lovecraft fan, but I'm sure many of our viewers are. I mean, I know about his Cthulhu mythos and how people have carried that on, but and I know a lot of Satanists and Luciferians are very into Lovecraft.
Oh yeah.
Let's see. What I saw on your website you list a bunch of sources, and at the bottom you had a source by Barbara Thiering and one by Ahmed Osman. What's your take on those authors?
Well, Osman is a little more. It's a little more reasoned. Like he actually has sort of scholarship to back him up on his things. Now, whether Jesus is really based on the character of King Tut, I would tend not to agree with that, but he does make a reasonable case. Like Barbara Thiering is more. She just sort of reads the stuff and dreams, and then sort of writes down.
Yeah, she just has feelings on everything and goes off her feelings.
Exactly, yeah. Which is exactly how I'm writing this book too, but at least I don't say it's true. Are you there?
Yeah, it does that sometimes. It's still going though. It's still on air. This time it didn't. It didn't cut out. Yeah. So okay. So there's those. What do you think about Thiering's idea that Jesus wrote John's Gospel?
No, I don't really. And anything she says, I think you have to sort of take with a grain of salt. It's
maybe just the parables, huh?
Yeah.
Also, you mentioned a guy named Gaius Falconellus, who's a spy, I believe, for the Emperor.
Yeah.
And you mentioned him speaking in tongues. What inspired you to connect the spy idea and speaking in different languages?
Well, he has to speak every language. In that context, he's talking about the drum language, actually. The people are playing the drums. I think I got that from some other anthropological thing. I don't think they had that there, but it seems like a good idea. But
yeah, I found that interesting. I kind of want to look into if there's a possibility of that being something important.
Yeah. But the speaking, I haven't really got into that much yet. I haven't. The later part of the story where Paul takes a more active role is. I'll get more into that, but I haven't really got into
I feel like you might be onto something with that, though, historically, actually. I got to look into it, but the character of Saul, who is Saul for you?
Well, you know who he is.
Well, I mean, I know who Saul is in the stories of the New Testament, but who is he the same for you? Is he different? Is he Simon? Is he a separate character?
There are ideas sort of based on there was the scholar in the 19th century, Bauer, what was his name?
Yeah, Bauer.
Right. Who came up with the idea based on the Clementines that that's the character of Simon, at least in the Clementine homilies, was supposed to be an attack on Simon, and so an attack on Paul,
right?
Because that was written by sort of surviving Clementines are kind of late, but these were surviving sort of Jewish Christians who wanted to sort of go back to the original roots. I'm not really sure what they wanted, but to go back to the original roots and to keep Christianity Jewish anyway. And they saw Paul as sort of...
They wanted to keep the law.
Exactly, yeah. And they didn't want Paul bringing in sort of Gentile ideas and sort of all this Greek mystery cult stuff that people accused Paul of bringing in. And I guess there is some sort of truth to that because he was raised in a pagan society. And
ironically, though, Peter still uses the word mysteries and has no problem with it in the Clementines.
Well, yeah, I thought in the Clementines overall, I thought that Simon came off much better than Peter. Like Simon's giving all these very well-reasoned arguments. And Peter sort of blusters and makes stuff up and then says, well, let me think about it. I'll tell you tomorrow. And then he forgets about it. And it's just...
Peter shoots himself in the foot a lot in the Clementines.
He does, yeah. And it's not even... Like, it's all heretical anyhow, what he says. All
his conjunction
just as
ideas
heretical as Simon's. But to say that Simon is
contagious.
Well, yeah. But so in that case, it's possible that they were using Paul as sort of an anti-Gnostic, using Simon as an anti-Gnostic thing and an anti-Paul thing. I guess it's possible. Like, if you like originally, obviously the Simon in the Acts isn't Saint Paul because Simon who wrote that Hippolytus and Irenaeus are writing about. They're writing about a specific character, and they know his history, and he's just not Paul, right? But in those particular in the Clementines, it's possible that they're using him as a sort of.
In the Clementines, he actually is very much like the Simon of Hippolytus, though. He has allegorical ideas on Genesis or interpretations of Genesis. He has. He has a story very similar. He's a Greek, or learned in Greek, myth, and he's a Samaritan who visited Egypt. Yeah, so there are similarities.
Well, the myth is cumulative, right? Like, there's the original one from the Acts, and then Hippolytus and Irenaeus write about it. So anyone writing about that character will sort of take whatever anybody's written before and then stick it all that in too, just to give it authenticity.
Right. What's your take on the stories of the descent of Inanna into the underworld, and maybe the Aerosmith and the Sophia myth?
Well, it's I do make a conscious connection between those. I make the character of Helena, who Simon rescues from the brothel. So I make her as being, at least one of her personalities, and she has many, is of Ishtar cast down to earth. So it's similar to Inanna being cast down into the underworld as sort of a punishment for some unnamed sin. So yes, I do connect that. The legend of Sophia, which from the Gnostics, of course, so the original Simon one, is that she was cast down by Yaldabaoth after he created the world and found out that he wasn't the top god, so he cast her down in his anger. And I have a dramatic version of that on the site too, The Passion of Sophia. Did you have a chance to look at that one?
I don't know if I looked at that one. I don't remember the names of all of them. I looked through like 4 of them. Yeah. I didn't get to read them all the way either. But I did endeavor to. Oh, well, Alex is here. So that's my co-host, Alex. Alex.
Hello. How's it going, Glenn?
Too bad yourself.
Pretty good.
So it looks like he was able to make it. I guess he'll have more questions for you. Let's see. What else? Actually,
but regarding Paul's relationship to Simon, there is an important thing which people seem to have missed, and which was sort of the basis for. Did you read the story that I had about Saul? You read the story of Saul, right? Saul's encounter with Glen?
I got to, like I said, I got to read bits and pieces through stuff, so I didn't get to read the full segments.
Okay, so you know that for a time anyhow they were very close, and actually in the Acts of Peter and Paul, I got a clue to that being the case, in that when Peter casts Simon down from heaven, it's very strange, but Paul is crying, and so there's some sort of connection. He has tears in his eyes.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, you can check the site. Alex, have you read any of the chapters that I put up there?
Yeah, I was reading one part of I think the Passion play of Sophia.
Perfect, right where we're at.
Yeah, I like that one.
Impeccable timing.
Oh, okay, good. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, your picture's kind of jerky, but I can hear you.
Okay, well, my picture's kind of jerky? Okay, I don't know what's up with that, but...
That's better.
That'll be fixed.
All that matters is your audio is working.
Yeah.
Alright, good.
So talk about the Eros and Sophia myth with him.
Oh, well, first I want to ask him where he got this idea from as far as writing a novel for Simon Magus.
We already went over that pretty much.
I did. Okay. It's just, I read about him first in a book by John Allegra, the Dead Sea Scrolls and hallucinogenic mushroom guy, and he sort of described him as being another sort of bizarro Jesus, basically, but sort of an alternate, the same character, but the opposite. And I just found that character very interesting, and it sort of combined all the things which I was interested in mythology and religion and anthropology and so forth. So I thought that it would make a great story, and so I did.
It's kind of like a badass Jesus, or
he is,
you know?
Yeah.
Terminator Jesus.
Well, Jesus could be pretty badass himself, of course, but
in
a different way.
Except for the part where he doesn't call the angels down from heaven to save him from the cross.
Yeah, well...
He hung up his badass leather jacket right there.
Yeah.
The bad boy Jesus. The bad boy that the Catholic Church loves to hate on. Yeah. Well, kind of going back to what James was saying, I was actually writing a essay called Eros, Orpheus, and On the Origin of the World. And I noticed similarities between the god Eros and Sophia. And I also noticed similarities between Eros and Christ as well. and it also even goes even further than that. Eros actually has also similarities with the demiurge. So it's like, I don't know, it's just really strange. Eros, how similar he's how he's kind of congruent with all these three different characters. Like for example, Sophia is depicted as this Aeon who falls in the Pleroma, but she's basically in between the deficiency, i.e. the material world, and the Pleroma, and it's called the Ogdoad. And she's kind of like in between these two realms. She's outside the Pleroma. And Eros in the Symposium is portrayed in the same way. He's kind of like an intermediary between the divine realm and the material world. And then the Gospel of Philip kind of goes into that too. Ooh, I hear like a terrible echo of me.
Yeah, it's okay. Maybe you might have to turn down your volume a little bit. Might be it.
Okay. Let me see if I can fix that.
Are you sure your mic's plugged in? Because sometimes the echo is because your speakers or your mic is picking it up from the laptop.
There should be put in. But anyway,
I'm seeing a wormhole now. What is that for?
We'll just have to bear with the audio. Just keep going.
Yeah.
Okay, what I'm saying is, in the Gospel of Philip, Christ is portrayed as this regenerative force that merges between man and woman, or he brings the two sexes together. Oh, I hear that really bad. Do you guys hear that at all?
Okay. Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah,
just keep going.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's a common theme, and for example, I have Simon studying under Philo in Alexandria, who sort of originated that type of idea of the logos, which mediates between God and man, and which was a foundation of a lot of the Book of John, for example.
It's very much like the daimon.
That theme. The which?
The daimon. It's very similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Eros is called the diamond in the Symposium.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So the theme is there. Simon sort of gets away from that theme himself in my story because he says he is God. He's not the intermediary. He is God the Father come down to earth, and that's it.
Which is pretty much what he was saying. He was saying he was the great power, and
exactly.
He was the Father, and he appeared in Judea or in Samaria as the Father.
Yeah. So that's but he appeared as the Father and he appeared as the Son somewhere else, I think, and the Spirit somewhere else. But yeah. So yeah.
Alex, you there?
Yeah.
Go ahead, ask away, man. It's all on you.
All right. Are you actually making illustrations for your novel?
I'm not now. I am an artist, and I do illustrations, but I haven't really done any. I'm getting it all in works right now. I'm not really sure what. I've done a couple here and there, but not really any that would go into the book. But maybe someday it'll be a comic, or it'll be a movie, or a TV series.
Oh, I'd love to see it.
I think it would be good for that.
I think it'd make a good TV series.
One of those Game of Thrones type things, yeah.
Yeah. That'd be awesome.
I'd love to see it in a TV show like that.
Yeah, so one thing at a time, but if I get interest through the Indiegogo campaign, maybe someone will decide to pick it up for that too, you know.
If only we could pitch it to HBO, and it'll be big success. Or Showtime. Before I was watching the video a little bit between you guys, and I think you were talking about Lovecraft.
Right.
Like, what does Lovecraft have to do with Simon Magus? I'm just curious.
I would say that there's a lot in common. The Gnosticism and the Cthulhu myth has a lot in common. It's basically that the universe is ruled by sort of evil monsters who don't care about you and who you should probably not be trying to attract their attention. And so that's a theme. Simon, in one of the chapters that I have there, is encounters actually someone. Are you a Lovecraftian yourself?
I'm familiar with Lovecraft. I've actually wrote a fan fiction of based on his work, actually, a long time ago. I mean, I was actually, long before, I guess maybe like 5 years ago, I was really into Lovecraft, and I kind of forgot about it. But I'll have to kind of dig into my memory banks to think about Lovecraft. But
well, among other things, if you look at the chapter in my ratings page on the website called Orchestra of the Damned, and you'll find some Lovecraft fan fiction there. So see what you think of it.
Great.
It's sort of the origin of the idea of Yaldabaoth in a Lovecraftian fashion.
Oh, awesome.
And there's sex and comedy there too, so hopefully it's
okay.
Something for everyone.
Okay. Not to read it. The story Sounds of Madness. Got that great.
I think you're breaking up there.
Yeah, now you're breaking up bad.
Okay. Maybe it's.
Should probably leave and rejoin. It's kind of shaky.
Yeah, let me. I'll Alexa back.
All right. Okay, so Glenn, why do you think Gnosticism failed and Orthodoxy triumphed? What's your take on that?
Well, they were two different solutions, I think, to the same problem, which was the Roman Empire had brought together all these people. So you had, most of them had pretty similar beliefs, right? They all had sort of a pantheon of gods that they worshipped, but then there was the Jews, and who had this totally other type of belief, and they just they kept to it. The Romans could never crush them or make them give it up, and so they basically gave up. They destroyed them eventually, but the idea was that there were all these ideas, and I think people were just sort of wondering. And then there was all the philosophers, of course, too, the naturalist philosophers, like Lucretius, the Stoics, who said that there's no gods, basically. The world is strictly natural. Right. It just developed through natural processes. And so early atheism, even at that time, was not uncommon. And so you had all these influences, and I think people were just very confused. They just didn't know what to make of it. Like, of course, the average guy just worshipped the gods of wherever he lived, and that was fine for him. But for people in charge, like, they needed to be some sort of new synthesis of all the things that people believed, like the Judaism and Egyptian mysticism.
Like
a universal religion that combined everything, that filled everybody's needs. Mm-hmm. And I think that Christianity and Gnosticism were two different responses to that. Mm. But Christianity always kept very simple. Mm. Like, they basically had one message. There's God has come to earth. He was a man. He died. He was buried. He rose, and he'll save everybody if they believe in it. So that was the basic message. The Gnostics, like, they never had a central authority. They never had they were always sort of in the shadows. They were these mystical type of guys who were discovering, sort of meditating perhaps within themselves, or some of them were sort of very licentious, like very sexually liberated. Other ones were very celibate. But they never really got together and formed a coherent thing. And mythologies just sort of added more levels and more eons and more whatever onto it until it just sort of collapsed, and Christianity took over by gradually converting people and converting people and converting people until it got up into the higher power, to the higher realms of the empire. It whenever it had a conflict, there were always these heretics, of course. Whenever they had a conflict, they would get together and they'd resolve it, and then that would be whatever they decided on. That would be the Orthodoxy after that. Mm-hmm. And if you still didn't believe it, you were a heretic and you were cast out. So they were just much better organized, and they just found the formula to succeed. And the Gnostics just sort of didn't. And they ended up just sort of on the fringes and the outskirts and sort of being associated with wizards and necromancers and things like that. And whenever they came up again, and like the Cathars and people like that, the church had enough power to just, cut off their heads and get rid of them.
Yeah.
And the people within the church who had those tendencies, the mystical type of people, well, they would be the saints. They would be people like Joan of Arc or Teresa of Avila, who saw visions and who wrote down their visions, but you weren't really supposed to be like them. But they were something that taught you a lesson, but it was better if you were not like them. If you were just sort of believe what you were supposed to believe, and that's it. Yeah.
Kind of like in the 4th century when there were pagans in the church, and they would just, there was, church fathers wrote accounts of them. I think Jerome wrote some, or Ambrose, and they were writing about, some people come and they worship Jesus outwardly, but inside they pray to Zeus.
Yeah.
So you had people like that.
Yeah.
But
well, as long as they're doing it outwardly, eventually they'll do it inwardly. Like the next generation will do it inwardly, because that's all they see.
So, what do you think about the emanation theories on the aeons among the Gnostics and the archons? What do you, and maybe Plato's theory of forms? How do you see those things?
Well, I guess they were taken, of course, from Plato, like the actual ideas. I've never really gotten into that part of it. They're sort of have common with Hindu avatars, for example. The same sort of ideas are there. The ideas of the archons, the evil rulers of the world. You can go back to Paul, because Paul talked about that too, the principalities and so forth. And so I think he influenced them in that. They were influenced, of course, by as Alex was saying, talking about Eros and sort of those figures, those mythological figures. So yeah, they were influenced by it. They brought it in. In my story, those eons and personalities which are in the pleroma are when Simon invents them, he names them after all his brothers and sisters, and so that's why those names are. That's why they have those names in the Gnostic scriptures.
Oh, okay. Let's see. What is there something else you'd like to give, like a tagline or a little bit more on your book that, something, just promote it right now, just give something away, anything random you'd like to give away.
I don't know. I would just say come to the website at simonmagus.com. There's lots of chapters from it, excerpts where you can see the truth about what really happened in those times, and it's just, I guess personally for me, it's sort of writing about, obviously autobiographical book. The ultimate character is the author, right? So I guess I'm getting out things about myself, which either I think about myself or perhaps wish I could have done in my life. If I could have been a charismatic God on earth, and that might have been good. So somehow I would have done things differently. I don't know. But anyway, simonmagus.com is there. There's readings from it. There's the Indiegogo campaign I'm hoping to have up in the next week or so. So I'll definitely be having links from that, and I'll let you know. Maybe you can put it up on the sort of add it to the recording of this.
Oh no, yeah, I'll add it to the discussion box for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, just send me the link to the Indiegogo campaign, and I'll put up simonmagus.com on the description box, and send me anything else you want to add to it, and definitely put it there. And if do you have a YouTube channel by any chance?
I do. Yeah. There's a video on
you can clone this and put it on there.
I definitely intend to do that.
Yes. Okay.
Oh, yes, I'll be using this a lot. Don't worry.
That'd be great. Okay. Well, thank you for your time, and it was great talking to you about your upcoming book. And I guess we'll just cut it right here. It doesn't look like Alex getting back on. I've pretty much exhausted my questions. But maybe we'll have you on again in the future. Maybe we'll have you on again once it's published.
I think so. Yes, I would like that very much. Yeah, it's been lots of fun.
Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you.